The grand hall shimmered under 1,000 floating lanterns, their light dancing across the polished obsidian floors. Music swelled, a haunting melody that seemed to pull at the very bones of those who listened, yet Lysera Kaelith moved through it as though she were invisible. The noble guests in flowing gowns and sharp-edged coats barely spared her a glance, except when whispers lanced through the air like poisoned daggers. "She can't even shift," one noblewoman hissed, her fan snapping shut with a deliberate flick. "Worthless," another muttered, the word hanging heavy like smoke. Lysera's stomach clenched. She had known this would happen. Every year at the Moonlight Ball, she endured the same sneers and sharp eyes. Every year, she tried to hold herself upright, to prove, at least in her mind, that she belonged. But this year felt different. Tonight, she had been chosen to accompany Ronan Vale, a beta with a reputation for strength and cunning, as his mate, or so she had hoped. The moment came suddenly. In a swirl of royal blue velvet, Ronan stepped before the assembly and let his words cut through the chatter. "I, Ronan Vale, reject Lysera Kaelith as my mate," he declared, his voice carrying with cruel precision. "I deserve strength. I deserve someone who can match me. She cannot." Gasps rippled through the crowd, and the laughter that followed burned into her ears. Lysera's knees felt suddenly weak, as if the floor itself had turned against her. Her hands trembled, clutching the folds of her gown, but she forced herself to stay upright. The mate bond she had felt, subtle, tethering, yet hopeful, snapped violently, leaving a hollow ache that clawed through her chest. What?" she whispered, voice barely audible over the murmurs. "Shh!" a voice sneered from behind, cold and sharp. "No one wants her anyway." Lysera wanted to disappear, wanted to melt into the shadows and never return. She could feel the weight of every eye in the hall, the cruel assessment of nobles and wolves alike, and it made her blood run cold. She had spent her life hiding, training in secret, suppressing what power she knew lived inside her, afraid of what others would say. And yet, the truth, buried so long, whispered now, she was not worthless. Not yet. But before she could gather her racing thoughts, the great doors at the far end of the hall slammed open with a force that silenced the whispers instantly. All eyes turned as a figure strode in, his presence radiating authority so palpable that the air itself seemed to bend around him. Kaeltherion Draevon, the Alpha King of the Northern Realm, moved like a storm incarnate. Broad shoulders squared under a cloak of midnight embroidered with silver threads, his eyes, cold, calculating, and yet impossibly magnetic, swept the room with a predator's precision. Lysera froze, her heart hammering not in fear, but in a strange, wild recognition. His gaze fell on her, lingering just a heartbeat longer than decorum allowed. And in that instant, a tremor ran through her, an instinctual, unshakable pull that made her knees weaken further, though this time, not from shame. The hall seemed to hold its breath. Kaeltherion's wolf, fierce and ancient, stirred within him, sensing the faint pulse of power buried deep in Lysera's veins. A ripple of tension rolled outward, even the most arrogant nobles shifted, suddenly aware that the balance of power in the room had changed. "Who called her worthless?" Kaeltherion's voice rang, deep and commanding, cutting through the chatter like a blade. Every whisper halted. Every eye turned toward the Alpha King, whose presence alone demanded obedience. No one answered. The hall had been silent, but for a moment, it felt as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Lysera's chest rose and fell rapidly, not from exertion but from a strange mixture of fear, awe, and the faintest hint of hope. Kaeltherion's gaze locked with hers, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. He moved forward, deliberate, every step echoing authority. He stopped before her, tilting her chin gently upward with one large, iron-like hand. The heat of his touch surged through her, igniting nerves she hadn't realized were alive. "She is mine," he said, each word deliberate, heavy with possession and unspoken promise. The hall erupted in gasps. Murmurs spread like wildfire. The nobles who had sneered only moments before now found themselves uncertain, their eyes flicking between the Alpha King and the girl he had claimed. Lysera's lips parted, her mind racing to comprehend what had just happened. She wanted to speak, to ask why, to protest, but the words lodged in her throat. Her pulse thundered so loudly that she thought he might hear it, and perhaps he did, for his gaze softened just slightly, a dangerous softness that made her stomach tighten. Ronan Vale, the beta who had rejected her, flushed crimson, his mouth opening and closing as if he had forgotten how to speak. His jaw tightened, and fury ignited in his eyes. "This isn't a," he started, but Kaeltherion's voice cut through him before he could finish. "Do not speak of her again," Kaeltherion said, calm but ice-edged, and every word sent a shiver through the hall. "I am the Alpha King. She answers to no one but me." The murmurs turned into whispers of disbelief, but no one dared contradict him. The king's presence alone rendered dissent meaningless. Lysera, still trembling, felt a strange warmth rise inside her chest. For the first time in her life, someone powerful, unyielding, and terrifying had seen her, not as weak, not as worthless, but as something more. Yet, even as relief sparked, unease prickled at her. Why her? She was nothing. No shifting ability. No influence. Only whispered rumors of a dormant bloodline no one had thought significant. And still, Kaeltherion Draevon had chosen her, publicly, before the eyes of every noble, every alpha, every observer in the hall. The evening blurred after that. Lysera followed Kaeltherion to the balcony overlooking the icy courtyard. The lanterns below flickered in the cold wind, and the murmurs of the ball seemed distant, almost unreal. She wrapped her trembling hands around the railing, staring down, trying to make sense of everything. "You are afraid," Kaeltherion said, his voice low, almost private, though she could feel it reverberating in her bones. "Good. You should be. The world has never treated you kindly, and neither will it now." Lysera flinched. "Why me?" Nothing." Kaeltherion's eyes, grey as frozen steel, softened in a way that made her chest ache. "Nothing?" he asked, voice a whisper now. "Nothing is not what I see. You are more than you realize, Lysera Kaelith. And soon. You will see it too." Her fingers clenched around the railing. She wanted to doubt him. She wanted to tell herself this was madness, that any claim made in public could be torn apart in private. But beneath her fear, beneath her trembling and shame, something stirred. A spark. A pulse. A sense of inevitability that she could not name, that she could not resist. Then a shadow moved beyond the balcony. Lysera turned sharply, but the wind carried it away. Yet she felt the prickle of danger, faint but unmistakable. She knew, somehow, that this night was only the beginning. The claim, the humiliation, the eyes upon her, they were merely the opening moves of a game far larger than she had ever imagined. Kaeltherion's hand brushed against hers. A warning? A reassurance? She could not tell. But the heat of it, the strength of it, ignited something she had long buried, the faint stirrings of power. Not just fear, not just hope, but something ancient and dangerous, ready to awaken. The wind whipped at the balcony, tugging at her hair, tugging at her resolve. Lysera closed her eyes, inhaling the icy air, trying to ground herself. She could not falter. She would not. She had survived whispers, scorn, and rejection all her life. And now, standing beside the Alpha King, claimed, marked, and yet uncertain, she understood that survival was no longer enough. Somewhere deep inside, something fierce and unyielding began to stir. A power she had never fully known. A lineage whispered about in shadow. A bloodline thought dormant, now trembling beneath her skin, waiting for the moment it could rise. Kaeltherion's eyes met hers again, and this time, there was no question, no doubt. He was certain. His wolf was certain. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel that certainty, too. This night, the Moonlight Ball, had promised humiliation. Instead, it had delivered destiny. And Lysera Kaelith, trembling yet unbroken, understood one thing with stark clarity: the world had called her worthless. But Kaeltherion Draevon had just made it clear that she was his. And in that declaration, the first threads of her true power, her hidden lineage, and her inevitable revenge began to weave themselves into the tapestry of her life. The wind bit at Lysera's cheeks, sharp and relentless, but she barely felt it. Her mind raced faster than her heartbeat. Every eye at the ball had seen her rejection, every sneer branded into her memory like fire. And now, Kaeltherion Draevon's claim had placed her at the center of attention in a way she had never imagined. She should have felt relief, perhaps even pride, but instead, a maelstrom of fear, confusion, and anger churned within her. "Why me?" she murmured, more to herself than to him. The words felt fragile in the cold night, like a whisper that could shatter. Kaeltherion's gaze was steady, unflinching. "Because I see you," he said simply. No flourish. No grand explanation. Just a statement, precise and undeniable. The weight of it pressed against her chest, heavy, impossible to ignore. She wanted to argue, to tell him that he must be mistaken, that she was nothing, and yet, the truth clawed at her, she had never been seen like this before. Not by nobles, not by her family, not by anyone. Her fingers flexed against the balcony railing. She could almost feel the eyes of every alpha, every noble, every whisperer, still burning into her back, even from a distance. She hated that she felt exposed, vulnerable, and yet there was an unsteady thrill beneath the fear. Something about Kaeltherion's presence made the humiliation of the ball seem almost irrelevant. He stepped closer, the sound of his boots a steady rhythm against the stone. She could feel the power in his presence, the raw authority that seemed to bend the cold wind around him. "Do not mistake my claim for leniency," he said, voice low, almost dangerous. "You are mine. And no one will touch you, nor will you falter under their gaze." Lysera swallowed, trying to steady the tremor in her throat. I don't understand," she admitted, the words weak, betraying the storm inside her. "I'm nothing. I can't shift. I have nothing to offer." Kaeltherion's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a moment, the softness she had glimpsed earlier vanished, replaced by something far more commanding, far more chilling. "Nothing?" he repeated, his tone carrying a steel edge that sent shivers down her spine. "You are more than you know. And if you do not believe it yet, you will. Or you will break trying." The words were almost cruel in their precision, yet there was no doubt that he meant them to steel her. Lysera's stomach tightened, a mix of fear and determination blooming inside her. She had spent her life believing herself weak, unworthy, invisible. But something in his voice, harsh, unrelenting, impossible to challenge, made her heart stir in a way she hadn't anticipated. A sudden clamor rose from the hall behind them. She turned her head just in time to see Ronan Vale, his pride wounded and his fury evident, storm toward the balcony. "You cannot just," he began, but Kaeltherion's movement was instantaneous. A shadow of authority, a subtle shift in posture, and Ronan froze, his words cut short by the king's presence. Kaeltherion's gaze sliced through him like a blade. "Step back," he commanded, voice low and lethal. "You will not speak her name again." The air seemed to tighten around the words, almost physical, and Ronan faltered, his arrogance crumbling. He left with a tight snarl, retreating into the hall, leaving a ripple of shocked murmurs in his wake. Lysera's hands shook, not from the cold but from the sheer force of what had just happened. She had never imagined someone could protect her so completely, so utterly. Her life had been one of shadows and whispers, of subtle cruelty disguised as indifference, and yet, here stood the Alpha King, a living storm, declaring that she mattered. That she was no longer invisible. Kaeltherion's gaze softened slightly as he looked down at her, though the sharpness in his eyes never fully left. "Do not mistake my protection for weakness," he said. "This world will test you, Lysera Kaelith. And you must learn quickly that power is not given, it is claimed. As you are claimed, so too must you claim yourself." She blinked, trying to absorb the weight of his words. Claim herself? The thought seemed foreign, impossible. She had spent her life hiding, surviving on scraps of dignity and fleeting moments of courage. And yet, something in Kaeltherion's presence, in the certainty of his gaze, stirred a fire she had long buried. The cold night air did little to calm her racing heart. She could feel it, the faint stirrings of something beneath her skin, an ember she had long thought extinguished. A pulse, subtle but insistent, that whispered of strength, of heritage, of a power that had lain dormant for too long. Her fingers trembled, brushing against the balcony rail, and a strange warmth coursed through her veins, leaving gooseflesh in its wake. "You feel it," Kaeltherion said suddenly, his tone almost a growl. She flinched, startled, realizing he had spoken without moving his lips. His wolf, ancient and relentless, had sensed it too. Something buried in her bloodline, long hidden, long dormant, had stirred. I don't understand," she whispered. "I don't feel anything." "How can you?" "You feel more than you know," he interrupted. "And one day, that feeling will be more than enough to change the course of this pack, this realm, and perhaps even your fate." His eyes bore into hers, unyielding, and she felt the weight of destiny pressing down on her shoulders. The fear and shame of the ball, the cruel laughter of nobles and alphas alike, seemed almost insignificant now. The wind shifted, carrying a distant whisper of danger, subtle but unmistakable. Lysera's pulse quickened, and instinctively, her senses stretched, reaching out beyond the balcony, beyond the lantern-lit courtyard. Something stirred in the shadows, something patient, watching, waiting. The world she had known, mundane, cruel, and predictable, was fracturing, and she was standing at its jagged edge, unprepared, yet unwilling to step back. Kaeltherion's hand brushed against hers again, steadying her, guiding her without overt command. "You are not alone in this," he said, and for the first time, Lysera allowed herself to believe it. But even as relief flickered, a sliver of doubt remained. She had been abandoned before. She had been labeled worthless. Could she truly trust someone as powerful, as intimidating as him? Yes. But why me? She asked again, voice barely audible over the whipping wind. Her own question startled her, she had asked it before, yet now it carried more weight, more urgency. "Because the moment I saw you, I knew," Kaeltherion replied, eyes narrowing as if peering into a truth only he could see. "Because you possess a strength that others overlook, a power hidden beneath layers of doubt and fear. And because I will not allow it to be wasted, or destroyed, by the ignorance of those who think themselves superior." Lysera's chest tightened. Strength. Power. Words she had never associated with herself. She wanted to argue, to protest, to insist that she was nothing. But the stirring beneath her skin, the whisper of dormant bloodline, refused to let her. She felt it pulse, faint but undeniable, a reminder that her life was never meant to be ordinary, never meant to be hidden. The night deepened around them. Lanterns swayed in the icy breeze, casting shifting shadows across the courtyard. The distant sound of the ball, laughter, music, murmurs, reached them faintly, but the balcony felt like a world apart, a place where only the two of them existed. Kaeltherion's presence loomed, constant, and the weight of his claim pressed against her in a way that was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Lysera shivered, not entirely from cold. I feel something," she admitted, voice trembling. "Something I can't explain." Kaeltherion's eyes glimmered, sharp and unreadable. "Good," he said, his tone low, almost dangerous. "That is the first step. Feeling is the beginning. Understanding will come later. And soon. You will realize that the world fears what you are capable of, just as I do." A sudden flicker of movement caught her eye, shadows darting along the edge of the courtyard, fleeting but unmistakable. Her pulse quickened. Danger was near, subtle but real. She wanted to recoil, to retreat into safety, but she found herself rooted, alert, aware in a way she had never been before. Kaeltherion followed her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Someone is watching," he said, almost to himself, but the words reached her ears. "They will test you. They will try to see if your claim is a mistake." Lysera felt a surge of fear, but it was tempered by something else, a spark of defiance, a hint of the power that waited, patient and quiet, within her. She had survived whispers, humiliation, rejection. And now, with Kaeltherion at her side, with destiny pressing close, she understood that she would survive this too. "Yes," she whispered, almost to herself. "I won't fail. I can't." Kaeltherion's gaze softened, just slightly, but it was enough to send warmth flooding her chest. "Good," he said. "Because failure is not an option. Not for you. Not for me. And certainly not for anyone foolish enough to challenge the Alpha King's claim. The wind whipped through the balcony again, and Lysera felt the first undeniable stirrings of something ancient and powerful deep within her veins. Her fingers trembled, her heart pounded, and she realized with a mixture of fear and awe that the night had changed everything. She was no longer the girl who had been dismissed, rejected, and labeled worthless. She was claimed. She was marked. And the fire inside her was awakening. The night deepened, and the moon rose high over the northern realm, spilling silver light across the icy courtyard. Lysera's pulse still raced, but it was no longer only from fear. Something within her had shifted, subtle yet insistent, a flicker of power, a heartbeat of strength she had never dared to acknowledge. She flexed her fingers, feeling warmth surge along her veins, and for the first time, the whispered legends of her bloodline, the Moonfire lineage, felt like more than just stories. Kaeltherion observed her closely, his piercing gray eyes unreadable, yet unyielding. "Do you feel it?" he asked, his tone low, almost private. "The stirrings beneath your skin?" Lysera nodded, hesitant. "Yes. But it's like something is trying to wake. I can't control it." "Control comes with mastery," Kaeltherion said, stepping closer. The air around him seemed to thrum with authority, and even in the cold night, heat radiated from his presence. "Right now, you are raw, unshaped. But the first pulse of your power is proof that you are not what they claim. You are far stronger than they can imagine." Her gaze fell to the balcony floor. "Stronger? But I've never shifted. I'm not like the other wolves. I'm weak." The word felt bitter in her mouth, but Kaeltherion's gaze pinned her like iron. "Shifting is not the measure of strength," he said sharply. "Strength is blood, lineage, and the will to rise when the world tells you to fall. You have all three, Lysera Kaelith, even if you cannot see it yet." She looked up at him, startled by the certainty in his voice. No one had ever spoken to her like that before, not with belief, not with absolute conviction. Her life had been whispers and shadows, rejection and sneers. And now, standing before the Alpha King, claimed, yet trembling, she felt the first stirrings of something dangerous and exhilarating. Then movement at the edge of her vision drew her attention. Shadows shifted in the courtyard below, subtle but deliberate. Someone was watching, observing, waiting. Her pulse quickened, fear prickling at the back of her neck. Kaeltherion's hand found hers before she could react, gripping firmly. "They are testing you," he said, almost a growl. "Do not falter. Do not show weakness. They will learn that the girl they dismissed is far from worthless." Lysera swallowed hard, her chest tight. I don't know if I can," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. He tightened his grip, and the faintest spark of his warmth flowed into her. "Yes, you can," he said. "You will. And you must. Not for them. For yourself. And for me." The weight of his words pressed against her, almost suffocating, yet it ignited a fire within her chest. A part of her wanted to collapse, to curl inward and vanish. Another part, the part she had long buried beneath shame and fear, burned with a fierce determination she had never dared to feel. Her pulse thrummed, and suddenly, a spark of silver light flickered along her veins, subtle but unmistakable. Her breath hitched, eyes widening. She could feel it, the pulse of her bloodline, the Moonfire energy that had lain dormant for years, awakening in response to the presence of the Alpha King, the intensity of the night, and the raw surge of emotion that coursed through her. Kaeltherion's gaze sharpened, and his wolf stirred within him, sensing the change. "Good," he said, voice low, dangerous, approving. "Do not fear it. Feel it. Let it awaken. The moment you embrace it, your world will change, and so will theirs." Lysera's stomach twisted. The power within her felt alive, like a creature clawing to be free, and fear mingled with exhilaration. She wanted to scream, to run, to hide, and yet the pull toward Kaeltherion and the inevitability of her awakening held her in place. A sudden noise from below drew their attention. Figures emerged from the shadows of the courtyard, subtle but menacing, nobles and alpha enforcers, moving with the precision of hunters. Lysera's heart leapt. They had come for her, perhaps to test Kaeltherion's claim, perhaps to see if the girl he had claimed was truly worthy. "Stay behind me," Kaeltherion instructed, his hand still gripping hers, guiding her to the edge of the balcony. "Do not show fear. Show strength. Even if you do not yet feel it, they must believe you do." Lysera nodded, though her hands trembled. She could see them clearly now, eyes narrowed, lips twisted in smirks, claws barely restrained. The same nobles who had mocked her earlier were here, their arrogance undiminished. But Kaeltherion's presence was a shield, a force that radiated power and demanded obedience. Even the bravest among them faltered at his gaze. One of them stepped forward, a tall male with a sharp jaw and calculating eyes. "Alpha King," he began, voice smooth, too controlled, "surely you jest. This girl. She is mine," Kaeltherion interrupted, his tone slicing through the chill air. "You will not speak her name again. You will not test her. Or you will face consequences that will make the pain of your rejection seem trivial." The man froze, realizing that Kaeltherion's threat was no empty boast. The air around him seemed to tighten, almost suffocating, and Lysera felt a thrill run through her. For the first time, she understood the depth of the Alpha King's power, and the protection he offered was absolute. Her own pulse surged with the power inside her. She could feel it, subtle yet undeniable, coursing along her veins, mingling with her fear and determination. Her eyes glowed faintly under the moonlight, the first visible sign of her awakening energy. The nobles recoiled, some whispering, others staring in disbelief. Kaeltherion's gaze never left her. "Do you see?" he asked, voice low, almost intimate. "Do you see what they fear?" Lysera nodded slowly. "Yes. I think I do," she said, her voice trembling but stronger than before. I feel it. Not nothing." "Good," Kaeltherion said. His hand tightened around hers, not roughly, but with a promise she could feel deep in her bones. "You are far from nothing. And soon, you will prove it to everyone who doubted you." A sudden gust of wind swept through the balcony, and Lysera shivered. Her gaze fell to the shadows below, to the silent watchers who lingered still, and a surge of determination bloomed within her chest. She would not falter. She would not be the girl who trembled under their eyes. She would rise, claim her power, and ensure that no one, no noble, no alpha, no beta, would ever call her worthless again. Kaeltherion's voice broke through her thoughts. "Come," he said. "We leave now. They are not ready for what you will become." Lysera followed him, every step deliberate, feeling the power within her respond to his presence. The balcony seemed smaller now, the night more intimate, as if the world itself were bending around the pair of them. With every step, her confidence grew, not fully, but enough to anchor her trembling heart. As they moved back toward the corridors of the palace, Lysera felt eyes upon them, hidden but unyielding. She could sense the envy, the curiosity, the subtle fear that rippled through the shadows. Her awakening had begun, and already, the world was taking notice. Kaeltherion's hand brushed against hers again, a reminder of claim, of power, of the bond forming between them. "This is only the beginning," he said, voice a low rumble. "You are not what they think. You are far more. And soon, you will see that even the Alpha King has underestimated the fire within you." Lysera swallowed hard, her heart hammering. She had been called worthless, humiliated, dismissed, and yet, here she was claimed, protected, and awakening. The fire in her veins, faint but undeniable, surged forward with every step, a reminder that her life was no longer hers alone. It belonged, in some measure, to destiny, to Kaeltherion, and to the power she was only beginning to understand. As they vanished into the corridors of the palace, shadows lengthened behind them, watchers retreating but observing still. The night had shifted, irrevocably. Lysera Kaelith was no longer the girl they had mocked. She was awakening, claiming herself, and preparing for the reckoning that would inevitably come. And Kaeltherion Draevon, the Alpha King, walked beside her, silent, unyielding, and aware of the storm he had unleashed by claiming her. The palace corridors stretched endlessly before Lysera, but her mind was elsewhere, racing faster than her feet could carry her. Every word Kaeltherion had spoken echoed in her head. Strength was not given, it was claimed. Power was awakened, not born fully formed. And though she had doubted herself for a lifetime, the pulse of energy in her veins whispered insistently, demanding acknowledgement. They entered the throne room, vast and gilded, lit by hundreds of floating silver lanterns. Nobles from the Moonlight Ball had followed, curious, cautious, unable to resist the pull of the girl the Alpha King had publicly claimed. Their whispers fluttered like nervous wings, but Kaeltherion's presence dominated the space, his wolf's growl resonating beneath his words even as he remained perfectly composed. Lysera's chest tightened. She felt the power stir again, stronger now, responding to the heat of her emotions, to the tension in the air, to the anticipation surrounding her. It surged like molten silver beneath her skin, awakening muscles, nerves, instincts. She was no longer the trembling, humiliated girl from the ball. She was something else. Something alive. Something feared and revered. Kaeltherion stepped beside her, towering and formidable. "Do you feel it fully now?" he asked, voice low, dangerous. "Do you feel what they cannot see?" Lysera inhaled sharply. "Yes. I do," she admitted, her voice firm, though her pulse still raced. "I feel it. Everything. Power, fear. Strength." A ripple of unease spread through the crowd. Nobles who had mocked her earlier instinctively stepped back as a faint silver aura shimmered around her, subtle yet undeniable, flickering with energy that seemed to bend the light of the lanterns. Her pulse accelerated, and with it, her power responded, reaching outward, brushing against the senses of every wolf present. Kaeltherion's eyes darkened. His wolf stirred, sensing the rising tide of energy, and he pressed a hand to her shoulder. "Good," he murmured. "Now they will see what they refused to believe." The beta, Ronan Vale, stepped forward once more, face twisted in anger and disbelief. This is impossible," he spat, voice trembling. She cannot be. She is not. She is mine," Kaeltherion interrupted, his voice rolling like thunder through the room. Every noble, every alpha, every beta froze. "You will not speak her name again. You will not doubt her. And if you do, the consequences will be swift and irrevocable." Lysera's heart pounded, yet she felt steadier than ever before. Something in her chest glowed, a silver flame of her own making, and her wolf stirred within her, ancient and fierce, calling out to the bloodline she had inherited. She raised her chin, meeting Ronan's furious gaze without flinching. "I am not what you think," she said, voice clear, strong, resonant. "I am Lysera Kaelith, and I am no one's nothing." Gasps swept the room. Whispers trailed behind her words like sparks. Nobles stepped back instinctively, sensing the power she emanated. The aura around her thickened, a visible shimmer of silver light, pulsing with every heartbeat, every breath, every emotion. It was subtle yet undeniable, dangerous yet mesmerizing. Kaeltherion's hand brushed hers, guiding her, steadying her. "Show them," he murmured, low, almost intimate. "Show them why you were never worthless." Lysera closed her eyes briefly, letting the energy course through her. She felt it peak, a surge of raw, ancient power, the Moonfire lineage awakening fully, demanding recognition. The silver glow flared brighter, radiating outward, and a tremor ran through the hall. The whispers faltered, replaced by stunned silence. Nobles shifted uneasily, some knelt instinctively, awe mingled with fear. Ronan's mouth opened, but no words came. His arrogance faltered under the weight of the power before him. Even the most confident wolves seemed to shrink back, instinctively aware that this girl, once mocked as worthless, now radiated dominance. Kaeltherion stepped forward, his presence overwhelming, the Alpha King who had claimed her standing beside her as her protector, her partner, her champion. "Let it be known," he declared, voice rolling across the room, authoritative, final, leaving no room for doubt, that the girl you dismissed, the girl you mocked, the girl you called worthless. Lysera lifted her head, eyes glowing faintly silver, aura flaring. The room seemed to shrink around her, the walls bending slightly under the weight of her energy. Every noble, every alpha, every beta felt it, the power of a girl who had been underestimated her entire life, now unleashed. Kaeltherion's voice cut through the stunned silence. "Dot is mine. She is claimed. She is strong. And she is not to be challenged by anyone who doubts her worth." The room fell utterly silent. Some knees bent instinctively. Some faces paled. The very air seemed charged with the intensity of the moment. Lysera's chest swelled with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, and for the first time in her life, she stood not as a girl called worthless, but as someone feared, respected, and undeniably powerful. Ronan Vale stumbled backward, face twisted in fury and disbelief. "This cannot be," he muttered, but even he could not deny what he saw. He had mocked her, he had rejected her, and yet she now radiated strength beyond his comprehension. Lysera's gaze swept across the room, locking with those who had whispered, judged, and sneered at her. She raised a hand slightly, a subtle gesture, and the silver energy pulsed at her fingertips, not enough to harm, but enough to command attention. The nobles recoiled. Some whispered apologies, others remained silent, too stunned to speak. Kaeltherion's hand rested lightly on her back, a grounding force, his wolf simmering with pride beneath his calm exterior. "This is only the beginning," he said, voice low, meant only for her to hear. "The world will test you, as it always has. But now, they will understand that you are not what they expected. You are far more." Lysera inhaled deeply, letting the power within her settle into her bones, her mind. She had feared this awakening, feared the attention, feared the responsibility. And yet, the fear was tempered by exhilaration, by the undeniable truth that she was finally stepping into herself. She was no longer the girl who trembled at whispers or flinched under ridicule. She was a force. She was claimed. She was powerful. "Thank you," she whispered, almost inaudible, but Kaeltherion's hand tightened slightly in response. "For seeing me. For claiming me." He inclined his head slightly, a shadow of a smile tugging at his lips. "It was always meant to be," he said, his voice rich, commanding, and intimate all at once. "The world has been blind to you. But not I. Never I." Lysera's chest swelled, a mixture of emotion and energy coursing through her. She could feel her bloodline responding fully now, the dormant Moonfire lineage fully awake, the silver aura shimmering brighter, casting soft light across the hall. Every noble, every alpha, every beta felt it. And for the first time, the balance had shifted. She stepped forward, not timidly, not uncertainly, but with purpose, every step resonating with newfound confidence. Her eyes swept the room, letting everyone see what they had refused to see before. A girl mocked, humiliated, and called worthless now stood radiant, powerful, and undeniable. Kaeltherion followed, a silent shadow of dominance and protection beside her. He made no announcement, no declaration of intent. His presence alone was enough to command attention, to intimidate, to signify that she was untouchable, unassailable. Lysera felt the energy pulse again, responding to her confidence, her determination, her awareness of destiny. She was no longer the invisible, rejected girl from the ball. She was the Moonfire heir, a force of power and will, and beside her, Kaeltherion Draevon, the Alpha King, stood as both protector and equal in authority. The nobles who had laughed, whispered, and sneered now bowed, knelt, or remained frozen, unsure of how to act. Their eyes could not leave her, their minds could not comprehend what had occurred. They had been blind to her strength, blind to her heritage, blind to the power they had underestimated. Lysera's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of her destiny, the thrill of recognition, and the intoxicating surge of power. She had been called worthless, humiliated, and dismissed. But no more. The world had watched her rise. The Alpha King had claimed her publicly. And she would not be anyone's nothing again. Her gaze met Kaeltherion's, and in that instant, wordlessly, everything was understood. They were bound by more than claim, by power, by destiny, by the unspoken acknowledgement of what had been awakened. And in that silent understanding, Lysera Kaelith realized with unshakable certainty that this was only the beginning of her reign, her rise, and the reckoning that would follow for all who had dared to call her worthless. The hall remained silent, the energy lingering, heavy and electric. Lysera's silver aura pulsed once, twice, thrumming with life, and then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to settle, a calm after the storm of awakening. Kaeltherion inclined his head once more, voice carrying through the quiet room, sharp and final. Let all who doubted her understand, she is mine. And no one will challenge that. Not tonight, not ever. Lysera stood taller, letting the silver light dim slightly but not vanish. The humiliation of the ball, the cruelty of whispered judgments, the sting of rejection, all of it had forged something stronger, sharper, and unbreakable. The world had called her worthless. But the Alpha King had claimed her, the Moonfire power had awakened, and Lysera Kaelith would never be dismissed again. If you enjoyed this story, like and subscribe for the next chapter. Comment Moonfire if you're ready for her rise.